Before Europe ever placed his face on a most wanted list. Before 7 nations formed an alliance just to bring down one man. Before the encrypted manhunts, the diplomatic scandals, and the intelligence failures that embarrassed governments across the continent, something unbelievable happened. One quiet evening in a small border town between Austria and Slovenia, a police officer walked into what he thought was a routine identity check. 5 minutes later, he vanished without a trace. No struggle, no noise, no witnesses, only the officer's radio, still crackling, and a single handwritten note placed neatly beside it. It read, "If you are reading this, I am already gone." The entire country froze. Within hours, Europol was notified. Within days, Interpol raised an alert. Within weeks, 7 nations, some of whom barely trusted each other, signed a joint operation, and all because of one man, a man who seemed to walk through borders the way other people walk through open doors. A man the media would later describe as the ghost Europe created. But what they didn't know then was this. The ghost was watching them too, tracking them, studying them, outsmarting them. And every time they closed in, he simply vanished again, like a shadow slipping out of the world. Today, you are about to enter a story that shattered Europe's trust in its own security systems. A story that exposes how intelligence agencies can fail, how criminals exploit political weaknesses, and how one person's choices can ripple across nations in ways nobody expected. And as you hear this unbelievable tale, remember this. Legends aren't always heroes, ghosts aren't always dead, and evil doesn't always come with a warning. His real name was Adrian Varga, born in the borderlands of Central Europe, where nations collided and languages blended. His childhood was ordinary, quiet even. He was no child of violence or chaos. He wasn't beaten, abandoned, or forced into crime. In fact, teachers described him as brilliant, too brilliant perhaps. He learned languages faster than most children learned games. By 13, he could pick up accents with unsettling accuracy. By 15, he could mimic handwriting like an artist. But brilliance without guidance can become dangerous. And Adrian's first taste of criminal behavior began not with violence, but with curiosity. The kind of curiosity that spirals into something darker when no one is watching. He forged his first document at 16, not to commit a crime, but to see if he could. And he could. And that small victory, an invisible applause from the shadows, became a doorway. From there, the line between talent and temptation disappeared. When he turned 20, Europe unknowingly opened its borders to him. The Schengen Agreement made travel easy, identity checks minimal, and fraud detection slow. For normal citizens, this meant freedom. For Adrian, it meant opportunity with no walls. He didn't begin as a mastermind. Crime is rarely a leap. It's a slow slide. A document here, a transfer there, a stolen identity, a vanished bank account. He slipped through countries unnoticed, never taking enough to raise headlines, never staying long enough to be tracked. His crimes were surgical, clean, quiet, professional. But as with all stories of ambition, something eventually changed. During an unplanned border stop in rural Hungary, Adrian encountered an officer named Laszlo, a man who had worked the border for 27 years and trusted his instincts more than technology. Laszlo sensed something strange. The eyes didn't match the passport. The details were too perfect. The accent slightly off. Most officers would have waved him through. Laszlo didn't. And that simple moment, that decision to double-check, triggered a chain reaction that Europe would later describe as the beginning of a very long nightmare. Adrian panicked for the first time in his adult life, and panic destroyed his discipline. In the confusion, he fled. The officer pursued, and in a single reckless moment, Adrian shoved him off a narrow ravine road. The officer survived, but the fall changed everything. Adrian wasn't dealing with fraud anymore. He had committed a violent crime, An international warrant was issued. His face appeared in briefings. His name entered security databases. He was no longer a ghost. He was a threat. And the worst part? His brilliance was not scared away. It was activated. Instead of hiding, Adrian began studying the systems pursuing him. He learned how police officers communicated, how border authorities updated their bulletins, how international databases refreshed, how long it took for one country to share intelligence with another. Then he did something unimaginable. He used their weaknesses against them. For the next 6 years, Adrian lived inside Europe's blind spots, the gaps between jurisdictions, the delays between updates, the loopholes in information sharing. One officer described him as a glitch in the system that learned to walk. He created at least 6 new identities, moved across 7 countries, and eluded 3 major intelligence agencies. Every time authorities thought they had him surrounded, they found a trap instead, a misleading trail, a false identity, a perfectly timed disappearance. His crimes escalated, but not in the way Hollywood imagines. He wasn't robbing banks or leading gangs. Instead, he became Europe's most elusive cyber-financial phantom, draining accounts, infiltrating payment systems, exploiting weak institutions, and funneling money through routes even experts hadn't mapped. His power wasn't violence, it was invisibility, and that invisibility humiliated nations. By the time 7 European governments united to capture him, Adrian had become a symbol of how fragile modern systems can be when exploited by a mind that understands their hidden gears. But the truth is this: criminal genius is still criminal, and brilliance used for destruction eventually destroys the one who holds it. The turning point came when Adrian attempted to use a stolen identity belonging to a French journalist. The journalist discovered unauthorized movements in his travel logs and went public. For the first time, Adrian's methods were exposed. He was no longer an invisible threat. He was a headline. The tightening began quickly. The noose was invisible but present, closing in country by country. Adrian made one final attempt to disappear. He changed his identity once more, forged a new life in southern Italy, and almost succeeded. But crime, no matter how elegant or intelligent, has a clock attached. And clocks always run out. One evening, at a small coastal cafe, Adrian met the wrong person, or perhaps the right person, depending on how you look at it. A retired detective from Germany, vacationing with his wife, recognized Adrian's face from a Europol bulletin he had studied repeatedly years earlier. Not because he was hunting him, but because Adrian's mind fascinated him. He had once called him a genius trapped in the wrong story. When their eyes met, Adrian understood instantly. He froze. Not because he wanted to surrender, but because the years of running had finally caught up with him. And in that moment of hesitation, fate interfered. Before the retired detective could alert security, a sudden eruption shattered the calm of the cafe. A violent alarm blared through the building, lights flashing, workers shouting for evacuation. It was a fire alarm. In the chaos, Adrian made a swift U-turn, slipped behind a service door, and vanished into a narrow passageway that led to the back of the building. By the time security forces arrived, he had already melted into the darkness of the coastal streets. Europe had been seconds away from capturing him. Instead, he disappeared again, like a ghost reclaiming the shadows. He hid for months, silent and invisible. And when he resurfaced, it wasn't to escape. It was to escalate. Over the next 5 years, Europe would come to know the name Adrian Varga in ways no one expected. He never carried a gun, never kidnapped a soul, never trafficked drugs, or engaged in violence. Instead, his crimes took place in the unseen networks of Europe's digital nervous system. Banks discovered breaches that left corrupt officials exposed. Hidden offshore accounts appeared in journalists' inboxes. Laundered money disappeared from oligarchs' holdings and reappeared in the accounts of orphanages and public hospitals. Every time authorities tried to catch him, he seemed to vanish into another country, another identity, another digital shadow. Interpol issued its first red notice for him when he infiltrated the financial records of a multinational corporation known for exploiting undocumented workers in 3 different countries. But this was not the act that made Adrian Europe's most wanted. That title came when he embarrassed not 1, not 2, but 7 nations in a single year. It started with a political scandal in Italy. Emails leaked, bank records surfaced, influence networks unraveled. Authorities insisted it was an internal breach, until a message appeared on a dark web forum. If you steal from the public has a right to know. Signed, AV. Before Italy recovered, Spain became the center of a massive investigation. Then Austria, then Germany. In each case, the pattern was unmistakable. Adrian was exposing corruption faster than authorities could hide it. Governments do not fear criminals who steal money. They fear criminals who steal secrets. That is when 7 countries, united by frustration and embarrassment, resolved to capture him at all costs. Joint task forces were formed, surveillance expanded, and cybersecurity budgets quietly doubled. Adrian, however, seemed to be 2 steps ahead of everyone. When they tracked him to Lisbon, he slipped through an airport minutes before agents arrived. When they found his rented room in Prague, he had already erased his presence. In Warsaw, they cornered an apartment, only to discover he had been watching them through hacked CCTV cameras the entire time. His brilliance was undeniable, but brilliance alone cannot run forever. Eventually, it runs out of places to hide. The breaking point came not from police pressure, but from a growing guilt Adrian had refused to confront. In exposing corruption, he had also destabilized institutions. Some small clinics lost temporary funding when certain accounts were frozen. Some innocent workers were investigated when digital patterns pointed wrongly in their direction. Adrian never meant harm, but harm came anyway, because even righteous battles carry unintended casualties. It was an old lesson his mother taught him that returned to haunt him. When you change the world, son, make sure you are building, not only breaking. Then came the moment that changed everything. Adrian received a message from a group of teenagers in Berlin who had begun to worship him as a hero. They wanted to hack a government agency to continue his work. They asked him for guidance. They asked him for leadership. They asked him for permission to become criminals like him. This was the moment he realized the terrible truth. His actions, no matter how noble he thought they were, had begun inspiring others into the very path he wished no young person would ever walk. Crime, even when dressed in noble intentions, creates shadows that other people may choose to walk into. That night, Adrian made a decision that shocked the entire continent. He turned himself in. He walked into a police station in Zurich, placed his passport on the desk, and simply said, "My name is Adrian Varga. I think you've been looking for me." Officers stared at him in disbelief. The man who had embarrassed 7 governments, slipped through 7 borders, and escaped countless traps had just surrendered with no resistance at all. His trial lasted months. Some called him a hero. Some called him a villain. But Adrian himself said something unforgettable to the court. Crime, even when you justify it, poisons your soul. It makes you believe you are above the system, above other people, above consequences. But the truth is this: no one builds a better society by breaking its laws. You build a better society by inspiring people to do right, not by proving how cleverly you can do wrong. The courtroom was silent. Adrian received a lengthy sentence, but even from prison he requested opportunities to teach. Today, he works with cybersecurity students, helping governments improve digital protection, and speaking to youth groups about the dangers of thinking intelligence gives you permission to commit crimes. His story teaches us something deeper than the thrill of the chase or the drama of escaping 7 nations. It teaches us that crime, even crime committed with good intentions, can never build a future worth living in. True greatness comes from lifting society, not outsmarting it. From building trust, not breaking systems. From choosing integrity, not illusions of heroism. Adrian Varga will forever remain one of Europe's most fascinating criminals, not because he was feared, but because he reminded us that the line between genius and destruction is thin, and crossing it never leads to peace. It only leads to a path where the brilliant eventually become prisoners of their own shadows. In the end, the world does not remember criminals for long, but it remembers the people who chose to rise above circumstance, who used their gifts to build rather than destroy, and who proved that a better society begins when individuals choose the harder path of honesty. Adrian learned this too late. But you watching this story do not have to. Crime is never the road to purpose, never the doorway to self-respect, and never the foundation for a better future. You build a better self by choosing integrity even when the world does not reward it. And you build a better society when you choose to be the person who solves problems without breaking the world in the process. This is the true story of Europe's most wanted, the man who outsmarted 7 nations, but finally realized the one enemy he could not outrun was the consequences of choosing the wrong path. If you found this story gripping, if you believe real crime stories should teach, warn, inspire, and not glorify criminals, then you're in the right place. This is Zerohour Manhunters, where truth hunts deception, where justice confronts darkness, and where every story brings you closer to understanding the world we live in. We don't just tell stories. We reveal lessons. We expose patterns. We uncover the human cost of crime. So if you want more global investigations, unsolved mysteries, elite manhunts, and real-life criminal breakdowns, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the Zerohour Manhunters community, where truth always catches up. Subscribe now. Your next story begins now.